The Galactic Concordance had kept peace across 12 star systems for 10,000 years. At its heart stood the celestial warriors, soldiers bred and trained to be perfect. They came from the most advanced species in known space, each one a masterpiece of genetic engineering and cybernetic enhancement. From the moment they were born, they trained in orbital academies where even gravity itself was adjusted to create the ultimate fighter. Humanity had joined the Concordance only 75 years ago. The other species viewed them kindly but without much respect. Humans were soft, lived such short lives, and got hurt far too easily. Their emotions made them unpredictable. When Earth sent soldiers to serve alongside the celestial warriors, the aliens thanked them politely and gave them assignments far from any real danger. Commander of the species had served with human marines before. She found them enthusiastic and brave, even admirable in their own way. But compared to her people, who could calculate 1,000 battlefield variables in seconds and whose cybernetic enhancements made them nearly unstoppable, the humans seemed fragile. She was 47 years old, which made her young for her species, and she had never lost a battle. Everything changed when they arrived. They came from somewhere beyond normal space, a swarm that had already consumed 17 galaxies. They moved like a plague, adapting to every defense, learning from every encounter. When they breached into concordant space at the outer rim, the celestial warriors mobilized immediately. 10,000 perfect soldiers, backed by the most advanced technology in the known universe. The first battle lasted 6 hours. The celestial warriors lost 3,000 troops. Commander watched the recordings afterward, trying to understand what had gone wrong. The celestial warriors had executed their tactics flawlessly, moving in perfect coordination, every action textbook perfect. And that was exactly the problem. They had watched them, learned their patterns, and turned that perfection against them. Every synchronized movement became predictable. Every tactical doctrine became a weakness to exploit. The second battle was worse. The third was a disaster. In the emergency council meeting, Ambassador from Earth stood to speak. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes. "I have a proposal," she said. "Earth would like to activate our veteran reserve protocol." The other species looked confused. High Scholar, a being of pure consciousness living in a crystal matrix, asked the question everyone was thinking. "You wish to send your old soldiers, those who are already injured and retired?" "Yes," Ambassador said simply. Commander kept her expression neutral, but inside she felt a mix of emotions. Pity for the humans who would send their weakest to die. Frustration that Earth would waste everyone's time with such a gesture. But also, buried deep, a tiny spark of curiosity. She had learned not to underestimate human stubbornness. "How many volunteers do you expect?" asked the Concordance military coordinator. "The message went out this morning," Ambassador replied. She checked her data pad. "So far, 7 million have responded." The chamber fell silent. 7 million, the coordinator repeated, "of your retired military personnel." "They're not all retired military," corrected. "Some are reservists who never saw combat, but most of them have fought before. Some of them have fought in wars your species have never even heard of." She paused. "You've seen our young Marines. Now you'll see what they become when they survive." The Concordance accepted. They were desperate enough to try anything. 3 weeks later, Commander stood on the landing platform as the transport ships arrived. She had expected military vessels, crisp and efficient. Instead, she watched as retrofitted civilian transports touched down, their hulls painted with names like Sweet Home Alabama and Remember the Alamo. The loading ramps descended, and the veterans emerged. Felt her confidence waver. These weren't soldiers, these were old. She watched as they came down the ramps in clusters, helping each other, moving carefully. Wheelchairs and powered mobility aids, prosthetic limbs of every kind, canes and walking sticks. Some had visible scars that ran across their faces and arms. Most had gray hair or no hair at all. Many of them looked like they should be in medical facilities, not on battlefields. One man caught her attention. He was tall, broad-shouldered despite his age, with white hair cut military short. He walked with a slight limp, and his enhanced vision immediately identified the prosthetic leg that replaced everything below his left knee. He wore an old jacket covered in patches and medals she didn't recognize. As he reached the bottom of the ramp, he turned to help a woman who looked even older than him, offering his arm with practiced ease. The man noticed watching and walked over. Up close, she could see he was probably in his mid-60s by human standards. His face was weathered, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. But those eyes themselves were sharp, taking in everything around him with the awareness of someone who had survived things most people couldn't imagine. "Commander," he said, offering his hand. "Gunnery Sergeant, United States Marine Corps, retired. Pleased to meet you." Shook his hand, surprised by the firm grip. "Gunnery Sergeant, welcome to Forward Base Epsilon." Smiled. "Thank you, ma'am. Beautiful facility you've got here." He glanced around at the assembled veterans who were organizing themselves with surprising efficiency despite their various limitations. "Hope you've got plenty of coffee. We go through a lot of coffee." "Of course," said, still trying to reconcile what she was seeing with what she had expected. "Sergeant, may I ask a personal question?" "Fire away, Commander." She gestured to his prosthetic leg. "Your injury, does it not hinder your combat effectiveness?" Laughed, a genuine sound that seemed out of place in a military base preparing for war. "Hinder it? Commander, I run faster now than I did before." He tapped the carbon fiber blade that replaced his leg. "And it never gets tired, never cramps up, and never complains. Got blown off by an IED on Mars about 15 years back. Best thing that ever happened to my running time." Didn't know how to respond to that. Among her people, such an injury would have meant immediate retirement to a comfortable civilian life. The idea of joking about it seemed almost alien. "Don't worry, Commander," said, his tone gentler now. "I know what you're thinking. You're looking at us and seeing a bunch of broken-down old warriors who should be sitting in rocking chairs, telling stories to our grandkids." He gestured at the still disembarking veterans. "And you're right. That's exactly what we should be doing. That's exactly what we were doing. But then we got the call, and here we are." "Why?" asked before she could stop herself. "Why would you come back? You've served your time, you've earned your rest." Was quiet for a moment, watching as the last of the transports touched down. "My wife asked me the same thing. Sarah, we've been married 42 years. She knew I'd go the second I heard about but she still asked why." "What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth. I came back because I know something your celestial warriors don't know yet." He turned to look at directly. "I know how to lose." Before could ask what he meant, alarms began blaring across the base. They had been detected, moving toward a nearby colony world. Every soldier on the base mobilized immediately. Ran toward the command center, and was surprised to find keeping pace with her despite his prosthetic. Inside, the tactical displays showed the situation clearly. They were moving in force toward Colony Theta 7, a orbital station with 15,000 civilians. "All Celestial Warrior units prepare for immediate deployment," the base commander ordered. "Human veterans will remain in reserve as backup forces." Stepped forward. "With respect, Commander, that's a mistake." The base commander, a crystalline being named Eth, turned to face him. "Explain yourself, Sergeant." "Your celestial warriors fight like a perfectly programmed machine," said, pulling up the tactical data. "Beautiful coordination, textbook maneuvers, optimal everything. And that's exactly what they have learned to counter. Look at your casualty reports from the last 3 engagements. Every time you execute a standard assault pattern, your losses increase." "Then what do you suggest?" Eth asked, irritation clear in his translated voice. Smiled, but there was something predatory in it now. "Let us lead. Let the celestial warriors watch and learn. because they haven't fought humans yet. They haven't learned that we don't fight like machines. We fight like people who know that plans never survive contact with the enemy. Commander studied the tactical display, then looked at and the other veterans who had quietly gathered in the command center. They didn't look like the heroes from recruitment posters. They looked like people who had been through hell and somehow made it back. "Sir," said to Eth, "I recommend we accept the sergeant's proposal, for this engagement only. If the results are unsatisfactory, we can return to standard doctrine." Eth considered for a long moment, then gestured approval. "Very well. Sergeant, you have tactical command. Try not to get everyone killed." "No promises, sir," said cheerfully, "but we'll do our best." As the veterans began organizing the assault, watch them work. There was no perfect synchronization, no textbook formation. Instead, they moved like individuals who had worked together for so long that words became unnecessary. An old woman with sergeant stripes directed 3 squads with nothing but hand signals and the occasional quiet word. A man in a powered wheelchair was already hacking into the station's maintenance systems, finding routes that weren't on any official map. "Commander," said, "you and your people are going to come with us, but I need you to understand something important before we go." "What's that?" "We're going to break every rule in your tactical manual. We're going to do things that make no sense. We're going to take risks that your computers will say are stupid." He checked his rifle, an old human design that looked primitive compared to Concordance weapons. "And people are going to die. Maybe some of us, maybe some of yours, but the mission will succeed because we're not trying to execute a perfect plan. We're trying to survive an imperfect reality." Felt something she hadn't experienced in years: uncertainty. Everything in her training said this was wrong, but everything in her experience said that doing what they'd always done would just get more people killed. "I understand, Sergeant," she said finally. "My unit is ready to follow your lead." Nodded and turned to address the assembled troops, both veteran and celestial warrior. "All right, everyone listen up. In about 30 minutes we're going to hit that station hard and fast. They think they've got us figured out. They think they know how we fight. So we're going to show them something new. We're going to show them chaos." High Scholar, observing from his crystal housing in the corner of the command center, recorded everything. In 3,000 years of studying warfare, he had never seen anything quite like this. The veterans moved with purpose but without the rigid discipline of the celestial warriors. They joked with each other, complained about their equipment, and made comments about being too old for this kind of thing. And yet, as the transports lifted off toward Colony Theta 7, noticed something interesting. Despite all their complaining and joking, despite their age and injuries, not a single veteran hesitated. Not one of them questioned whether they should go. They had answered the call, and now they would fight, because that's what they had always done. The transports accelerated toward the station, toward the waiting, toward a battle that would change everything the Concordance thought it knew about war. Sergeant checked his rifle one more time, then looked at Commander sitting across from him in the transport. "You ever wonder why humans are so good at war, Commander?" "Tell me," she said. "It's because we're so bad at it," he replied. "We make mistakes, we get hurt, we lose. And then we have to figure out how to keep going anyway. That's not something you can program into a perfect soldier. That's something you only learn by surviving when you shouldn't have." The transport shuddered as it entered the station's damaged docking bay. The doors opened, and the veterans poured out into chaos. The real lesson was about to begin. The assault on Colony Theta 7 began exactly as planned, which meant it immediately went wrong. The Celestial Warriors breached the station's primary docking bay in perfect formation, their movements synchronized to the microsecond. Energy weapons fired in calculated patterns, suppression fields deployed at optimal intervals, and advanced units moved with mechanical precision. Commander led her squad through the breach, her tactical computer painting enemy positions in glowing red. Everything was proceeding according to doctrine. She felt confident despite warnings. Perhaps the old human had been too pessimistic. Perhaps perfection could win after all. Then the adapted. It happened faster than any previous engagement. The alien swarm seemed to predict every movement before it happened. They flowed around the celestial warriors' defensive positions like water around stones. When squad advanced down a corridor, they were already waiting. When they fell back to a fortified position, the enemy had already outflanked them. Within 10 minutes, this unit was pinned down in a cargo bay with no good options. Her tactical computer offered 3 possible courses of action, each with a survival probability below 15%. She was preparing to order a desperate breakout when she heard something unexpected over the general communication channel. Singing. Someone was singing an old Earth song while firing their weapon. The voice was gravelly and off-key, but unmistakably human. "What is your status?" demanded, checking her tactical display. The veteran positions made no sense. They weren't following any recognizable pattern. "Oh, we're doing just fine, Commander," his voice came back, calm despite the sound of weapons fire behind him. "Just taking a little stroll through the maintenance sections. Did you know this station has a really interesting ventilation system?" "That area is not tactically relevant," snapped, flinching as enemy fire impacted near her position. "We need support at the primary cargo bay immediately." "Yeah, about that," said. "We're not coming to the cargo bay." Felt a flash of anger. "Sergeant, we are pinned down if you do not provide support." "Hold on, Commander. Watch your 6 in about 15 seconds." Turned, confused. Behind her position was nothing but a solid wall. Then she heard it, the screech of metal being cut. A maintenance panel suddenly exploded outward, and a gray-haired woman emerged from the duct, followed by 3 more veterans. The woman, who couldn't have been younger than 70, had a plasma cutter in one hand and a rifle in the other. "Sorry about the noise, honey," the woman said, her accent thick and strange to ears. "Names, now, y'all might want to cover your ears." Tossed something into the duct she just emerged from. 3 seconds later, an explosion ripped through the maintenance system behind the positions. The enemy forces, suddenly attacked from an unexpected direction, broke formation. "Now, Commander," his voice shouted over the comm, while they're confused. Didn't hesitate. She led her squad in a counterattack that shattered the positions. By the time the enemy regrouped, the Celestial Warriors had linked up with veteran units coming from 6 different directions, none of which made tactical sense. "Sergeant," said as they established a temporary defensive perimeter, "what exactly just happened?" Appeared from a side corridor, his prosthetic leg somehow splattered with what looked like grease. "We improvised, Commander. See, your battle plan was great and all, but battle plans only work when the enemy cooperates. They weren't cooperating, so we stopped following the plan." "But without coordination." "Oh, we coordinated just fine," interrupted, helping an older man climb out of a floor access panel. "We just didn't coordinate in any way they could predict. Came through the ducts. Martinez's team used the zero-G cargo lifts. And here," he gestured at the man he just helped up, who had to be at least 80 years old, "found a maintenance tunnel that nobody even knew existed." Grinned, showing several missing teeth. "I worked construction before the service. Always check the blueprints, but more importantly, always assume the blueprints are wrong." High Scholar's voice came over the command channel, his crystalline tone puzzled. "I have been observing the engagement. Gunnery Sergeant, your units have violated 47 tactical protocols in the last 20 minutes. "Yeah," said, "how many of my people are dead?" There was a pause. "You have sustained 3 serious casualties and 7 minor injuries." "And how many Celestial Warriors died following protocols?" Another pause, longer this time. 17 confirmed deaths in the initial breach, 23 wounded." "Then maybe your protocols need updating, Scholar." Checked his rifle and looked at. "Commander, We need to push deeper into the station. The civilians are trapped in the central habitat ring, but I need to know right now. Can your people stop fighting like celestial warriors and start fighting like soldiers? Looked at her squad, then at the veterans. Everything she had learned, everything she had been trained to do, said that what was suggesting was chaos. But she had just watched that chaos save her life. "What do you need us to do?" she asked. Over the next 6 hours, Commander received an education in human warfare. Split the combined forces into dozens of small teams, each one autonomous and unpredictable. There was no grand strategy, no synchronized assault. Instead, each team moved independently, adapting to whatever they found. His team was paired with a veteran named Tors, a man with one cybernetic eye and burn scars covering half his face. He led them through the station using a route that made no logical sense, doubling back on themselves, moving through civilian areas instead of tactical corridors. "Why are we taking this path?" asked after the third detour. Tors paused at an intersection, listening to something couldn't hear. "Because they are smart, they learn, they predict, so we stay unpredictable. Sometimes that means doing the smart thing. Sometimes." He took a left turn down a corridor that was clearly marked as damaged. "It means doing the dumb thing that nobody would expect." The corridor opened into a damaged section of the station, half exposed to space and held together by emergency fields. Tors moved forward carefully, testing each step. "This is extremely dangerous," protested. "The structural integrity is terrible." "Yeah," Tors agreed. "Which is why they won't expect us to come this way. Watch and learn, Commander." They crossed the damaged section without incident, emerging behind a major position. The surprise attack was devastating. By the time the enemy repositioned, Tors had already led the team through another unexpected route. Throughout the station, similar scenes played out. An elderly veteran used his wheelchair's powerful motors to ram through a weakened wall, creating a new entrance. A grandmother with shaking hands steadied her rifle against a railing and made impossible shots with decades of muscle memory. A man who moved with a cane became a tactical genius when stationary, directing 3 separate teams through a complex series of maneuvers that somehow worked despite appearing random. The optimized to counter coordinated tactics and perfect formations found themselves fighting an enemy that had no formation at all. Every time they adapted to one approach, the humans changed to something completely different. There was no pattern to learn, no doctrine to exploit. But the cost was high. Watched as veterans fell, their old bodies unable to withstand impacts that younger soldiers might have survived. A man named died holding a doorway so his team could evacuate wounded. A woman called sacrificed herself by detonating her armor's power core to take out a cluster that had them trapped. After each loss, the remaining veterans paused for exactly 3 seconds of silence, then kept moving. There was no time for grief, no time for regret. That would come later. Now there was only the mission. Found on the habitat ring's outer perimeter, coordinating the civilian evacuation. He was limping worse now, his prosthetic damaged in fighting she hadn't witnessed. There was blood on his jacket, though she couldn't tell if it was his. "We're almost done," said, watching as another group of civilians boarded an escape shuttle. "Another hour and everyone's out." "The cost," said quietly, "so many of your people." "I know," cut her off, his voice gentle but firm. "I know every one of them, Commander. Taught my son how to fish. Used to send my wife her famous dumpling recipe every New Year. Had grandkids starting college next month." He paused, watching the evacuation continue. "But they knew, we all knew, some of us wouldn't make it back. That's part of the deal." "How can you be so calm about it?" Turned to look at her. "I'm not calm, I'm heartbroken, I'm angry, I'm tired. But being calm isn't my job right now. Getting these people to safety is my job. I'll fall apart later when there's time." An explosion rocked the station, checked his tactical display and cursed. are making a push toward the evacuation points. They've figured out what we're doing." He activated the general channel. "All units, they're coming for the civilians. We need to buy them time." "How long?" someone asked. 30 minutes should do it. "And if we can't hold for 30? Smiled grimly. "Then we hold for 29 and hope it's enough. Take teams Alpha through Delta and set up at checkpoints 7, 9, and 12. Don't try to stop them, just slow them down. Taurs, you've got Epsilon through Foxtrot. Hit and run, keep them confused. Celestial Warriors," he looked at, "you're with me. We're going to do something really stupid." Found herself following deeper into the station, toward the main force rather than away from it. Her squad of Celestial Warriors moved with her, their previous confidence replaced by something else. Respect mixed with concern for their apparent madness. "Sergeant," said as they approached the enemy positions, "what exactly is your plan?" "We're going to get their attention," said simply. "All of it. Every on this station is going to want us dead more than they want anything else. And then we survive longer than we should be able to." They emerged into the station's central plaza, a massive open area that they had turned into a staging ground. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands. His tactical computer immediately flagged the situation as unsurvivable. Raised his old rifle and fired a single shot into the swarm. "Hey," he shouted, "over here, you ugly bastards." They turned their attention toward them, felt her heart rate spike despite her enhancements. "Now we run," said calmly. "And Commander, don't try to fight smart, just fight mean." What followed was the longest 30 minutes of his life. They ran through the station with the entire force behind them, fighting a running retreat that violated every tactical principle she had ever learned. Led them through impossible terrain, over damaged sections, through areas that should have been collapsed. They used explosive decompression as a weapon, turned the station's own systems against their pursuers, and fought with a creativity born of desperation. Her squad started to understand. When made a tactical mistake, putting them in a dead end, one of her soldiers simply blasted through a wall to create an exit. When they should have made a coordinated fighting retreat, they instead scattered in 6 different directions, reuniting 3 corridors later in a way that confused the pursuing completely. They were learning to think like humans. They were learning to be imperfect. Once timer hit 30 minutes, he led them to an airlock. Through the window, they could see the last civilian shuttle departing. "Mission accomplished," said, breathing hard. "Everyone made it." "Now what?" asked, looking at the forces closing in from all directions. Grinned, that same predatory expression she'd seen before. "Now we make our own exit." He triggered the explosive charges they'd been planting during their retreat. The detonations tore through the station's infrastructure, creating a path of destruction toward the hangar where a final military transport waited. They ran. Behind them, the station began tearing itself apart. Ahead, the transport's engines were already warming up. Some of the Celestial Warriors fell, overcome by injuries or exhaustion. The veterans grabbed them, dragged them forward, refusing to leave anyone behind. Was the last one aboard, pulled into the transport by himself. As the doors closed and they accelerated away, she looked back at Colony Theta 7. The station was coming apart, large sections already drifting free. They would find no victory there. In the transport's cargo bay, medics worked on the wounded while the survivors sat wherever they could find space. Collapsed next to, her perfect body exhausted in ways she didn't know were possible. "That was insane," she said. "Yeah," agreed, accepting a bottle of water from another veteran. "But it worked." High Scholar's voice came over the comm. "Gunnery Sergeant, your after-action report will be extensive." "Looking forward to writing it," Scholar said. Then he looked at, "Commander, you did good today. You and your people, you adapted. That's the hardest thing to learn." Thought about everything she'd witnessed. The chaos, the improvisation, the seemingly random decisions that somehow worked. And the cost. She thought about and all the others who hadn't made it back. "I understand now," she said quietly. "Why you came back, why all of you came back. Yeah. You fight like people who know they might lose, but you also fight like people who refuse to accept losing. It's not about perfect tactics. It's about being more stubborn than the enemy." Smiled and raised his water bottle. "Welcome to human warfare, Commander. It's messy, it's ugly, and it'll break your heart. But we're still here, still fighting. That's got to count for something." As the transport carried them back to base, looked around at the veterans. They were treating wounds, sharing supplies, and yes, joking about the day's events. They had lost people, had seen horrors, had pushed themselves beyond reasonable limits. And tomorrow, they would do it all again. Because that's what humans did. They survived. The defense of Sanctuary came 6 weeks after Colony Theta 7. In that time, the veterans had trained thousands of celestial warriors in human tactics. Not all of the aliens took to it well. Some couldn't accept the chaos, the lack of structure. But others, like Commander, began to understand that perfection was a weakness as much as a strength. Sanctuary was different from previous engagements. It wasn't a station or an outpost. It was a full colony world with 3 billion civilians, most of them refugees from other attacks. It had cities, farms, families. Children who had never known war playing in streets while their parents tried to rebuild lives torn apart by the swarm. The fleet that approached Sanctuary was the largest force anyone had ever seen them field. Thousands of ships, millions of ground forces. The Concordance's best tactical computers ran the simulations and concluded the same thing every time: total annihilation within 48 hours. The Concordance Council called for immediate evacuation. 3 billion people couldn't be moved in time, but they could save a significant percentage. It was the logical choice, the smart choice. Gunnery Sergeant stood before the council and said 2 words: "We hold." "Sergeant," the council leader said patiently, "the numbers are clear. You cannot hold Sanctuary. No force in the galaxy could hold against what is coming." "You're right," agreed. "No force in the galaxy could hold perfectly, but we don't need to hold perfectly. We just need to hold long enough." "Long enough for what?" "Long enough for you to realize that they can be beaten. Long enough for the people of Sanctuary to see that someone stood up for them. Long enough to matter." Looked around the council chamber. "We've spent 6 weeks teaching your celestial warriors how to fight like humans. Now it's time to see if they learned anything." High Scholar spoke from his crystal housing. "I have been documenting your tactics, Gunnery Sergeant. They are effective against superior forces, yes, but this is not merely superior. This is overwhelming." "Overwhelming is what we do best," Scholar replied. "Give us 3 days. If we can't hold for 3 days, evacuate whoever's left, but give us the chance." The council debated for hours. Finally, they agreed. 3 days. The veterans would have 3 days to prove that stubborn human resilience could stand against impossible odds. Gathered his command staff on Sanctuary's surface. They met in a prefabricated building that served as the military headquarters, surrounded by defensive preparations that were impressive but clearly insufficient for what was coming. Maps covered every wall, showing the planet's cities, infrastructure, and terrain. "All right, everyone," said, looking at the assembled veterans and celestial warriors. "Let's talk about how we're going to lose this battle." Commander, who now served as his second-in-command, nodded. She understood. The first step in human tactics was accepting that the perfect outcome wasn't possible. "They're going to land here, here, and here," pointed at the maps. "Standard doctrine. They'll establish beachheads, then spread out to consume the planet systematically. Our job is to make every inch of ground cost them so much that they start questioning whether it's worth it." "The don't question," a celestial warrior said. "They consume, it's what they do." "Everything questions when the cost gets high enough," replied. "We just have to make the cost really, really high." They spent the next 2 days fortifying Sanctuary, but not in any way they would expect. They didn't just fortify the strong points. They fortified everything. The weak points, the useless positions, the places that made no tactical sense. They set traps in locations where no sane defender would bother. They prepared fallback positions that had their own fallback positions, layered so deep that even wasn't sure where they all ended. "This is tactically incoherent," one of the celestial warriors complained. "That's the point," told him, surprised at how naturally the human thinking was coming to her now. "They can't predict incoherence. They can only adapt to patterns, and we're not giving them any patterns to adapt to." The civilians knew something was coming. They could see the military preparations, could feel the tension in the air. Some wanted to evacuate immediately, but most chose to stay, to trust in the soldiers who had come to defend them. Spent the evening before the battle walking through the capital city of New Haven. He stopped at a small restaurant where an elderly couple was still cooking dinner for whoever wanted it. They gave him a meal, refusing payment, thanking him for staying. "You should evacuate," told them gently. "What's coming? It's going to be bad." The old man shook his head. "We've been refugees 3 times already, Sergeant. Every time they come, we run. Maybe it's time someone stood and fought instead." Understood. He ate his meal, thanked them again, and continued his walk. He thought about his wife Sarah, back on Earth, about his children and living lives made possible because people like him had stood and fought when it mattered. He touched the photo he carried in his pocket, then headed back to command. Commander found him in the headquarters, staring at the tactical displays showing the approaching fleet. "I've been thinking about what you said," she told him, "about knowing how to lose. Yeah, I think I finally understand. It's not about accepting defeat. It's about accepting imperfection, about knowing that things will go wrong, people will die, and plans will fall apart, and still choosing to fight anyway." Smiled. "Now you're thinking like a human, Commander." "Is it always this frightening?" "Every single time," admitted, "but that's how you know you're alive." They arrived at dawn. Their ships filled the sky, blotting out the sun. Drop pods rained down like meteors, and within minutes the first wave of ground forces was spreading across the planet's surface. They moved with their characteristic efficiency, establishing beachheads exactly where the tactical computers had predicted, and walked directly into the prepared defenses. The veterans didn't try to stop them from landing. That would have been impossible. Instead, they let them land, let them think they were succeeding, and then made them pay for every meter of advance.